Good morning. 59 days to the election day, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission will undertake the functional testing and verification of electronic technology today. In attendance will be representatives from all political parties, civil society organizations, faith-based organizations, youth groups, government and quasi-government bodies. As the voters' verification exercise comes to an end today, the IBC is confident that the use of technology to authenticate voters using biometrics is a test to the Commission being ready for the general election. But is that the case? On Citizen Extra this morning, we will delve into that. Remember, the Elections Act of 2011, Section 44, requires the Commission to test, verify and deploy such technology at least 60 days before a general election. End quote. Also happening today, President Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy William Ruto are expected to tour Singishu County today, a week after ethnic tensions threatened to dominate the gubernatorial race. Incumbent Governor Jackson Mandago has threatened to rally his supporters to vote for the opposition presidential candidate in retaliation for what he claims is the Jubilee leadership's hand in his rival's bid. On the other hand, Zedekiah Bunotich alias Buzeki has remained adamant that he will not step down from the race. Mandago and his allies are demanding that, just like in the Nakuru governor's race, where Governor Kinuthia Mbugua was prevailed upon to step down, the Jubilee leaders should pressure Buzeki too to withdraw his candidature. And as violence against women during this campaign period gets real, by the day, Healthcare Assistance Kenya, in collaboration with the Ministry of Public Service, Youth and Gender Affairs, the National Police Service and State Department of Gender will this morning launch a preventive and responsive 24-hour service. Now, the 1195 hotline service is meant to mitigate violence against women during this election period. The launch will kick off with a walk from Uhuru Park that will serve as a call for peace and protection of women as they participate in the 2017 elections process. Now, we'll delve into these and more matters today. We kick off with the nurses' strike talks led by the Labour Ministry to end the stalemate yesterday failed as the Council of Governors and the Health Workers Union maintained their hardline stance. Now, the governors are now threatening to take action against the nurses, terming the nurses' strike illegal. Unions on their part are accusing the government of being insensitive to their plight. Now, to help us put this and analyze this, we have analyst Dennis. We will be joined by analyst Dennis Thumbi, Charles Kipkulei, Gabriel Muzuma later on, and Gakure Monyo, who is the Deputy Governor of Murang'a. Gentlemen, we begin there. Of course, the unions are accusing the COG of being insensitive to the plight of the nurses, and yesterday CS Kandia failed to turn up as the talks failed between the government and the nurses. So is this a message from the government's commitment? Is this matter being treated casually? We begin with the Deputy Governor of Murang'a.
Looking at what is going on is that there was a clear indicator that the Council of Governors and the Nurses Union and the Ministry of Health had a goodwill in looking at the initial signed MOU or what was agreed about the salaries, and it was put across to SLC to authenticate and see how it is. But from that, it started with the premise that SLC found that it was too much, though the paymaster, who is Council of Governors, had already agreed on moving that. It is the impetus of now the Labour Ministry to ensure that the tripartite discussions yield into good results so that the nurses can go back to work and we stop seeing patients suffer.
But the nurses and the unions are also saying that, you know, this time the Council of Governors doesn't seem to be offering any sort of backing to them. In fact, the COG has said that the strike is illegal, and Nanok, the chairman, is on record as saying that, you know, they did not follow the procedures as laid down. They did not give a notice of the strike. So is it that they say they're not getting support from the Council of Governors vis-a-vis what was happening during the doctor strike?
The nurses are failing to pick the goodwill that has been shown to them by the Council of Governors. And the Council of Governors was willing to discuss, and they discussed, and they put together the CBA that was put to SLC. I think the nurses have now to agree that it can only be done after goodwill is shown. And the chairman of the Council of Governors, His Excellency Joseph Nanok, has put it very clearly that there is goodwill from the Council of Governors, and we can't understand why the nurses are failing to understand that.
All right, gentlemen, Dennis, Charles as well, what is your take on this particular issue? So we have the meeting yesterday between SRC, the unions and COG. They are still discussing the CBA. What is your take on the matter?
Thank you, Willis. That's a very critical question.
First of all, we have to save the health sector in this country and take it away from the hands of politicians, so that we can preserve the dignity of the medical practice, medical profession, and we can also bring integrity back into the health sector. That is what I think. The other thing, I think there is lack of political goodwill in paying the nurses, and you know, it's a sad thing to see, Willis, that the Council of Governors has deliberately refused to enumerate the doctors and even the nurses thereabout. So I think technically we need to relook at who manages the health sector, so that then we can bring dignity back to the health sector. But the SRC has accused the COG, Council of Governors, for their lack of goodwill in ensuring that this matter is settled.
All right, before we go to Charles, we go back to the Deputy Governor. So you see the COG, you know, the SRC saying there is no goodwill. It is the opinion also of our brother Dennis that there is no goodwill. Yet you say that there is goodwill. So is this the case? Have you failed to remunerate or to give them their money, basically?
Let me take you some days back. Some day last week, the Nurses Union, the Ministry of Health, and the Council of Governors sat and agreed on the collective bargaining agreement, which they put as a draft, appended signatures by the three teams, and then presented to the SRC, because they are the real custodians of finding out whether the proper remuneration is done. That, to me, was the initial sign of goodwill. Because when the 15 signed, Council of Governors, Ministry of Health, and the Nurses Union, they had the understanding that this is what we're asking for. It's only that SLC must be the one who will finally determine what remuneration is ideal for the nurses. So I can tell you clearly there was goodwill, because at the point that they signed, they had agreed this is the way forward. Where it turned is when SLC took a little bit of time to look at that agreement and then failed to give it a green light. Hence now when the Ministry of Labour came in to try and look at whether it was going to resolve the issues between the four teams now.
So Charles, I want to bring you in as well. So in your view, is it then where does the buck stop? Because we have the COG, we have the government, and then you have SRC that basically everybody's waiting for to give the green light, as the Deputy Governor says.
Well, thank you, Willis. I think in my view, what you are seeing here is the failure of proper interagency cooperation and intergovernmental cooperation in matters that affect matters of national importance, and especially an issue of the nurses strike, which is something essentially that emanates from the counties but has a national impact. So first of all, what we are seeing here is that it's a back and forth between the SRC, the COG, and even the nurses union themselves. They are infighting. So at the top of it, we are seeing a very weak form of cooperation between all of them, especially yesterday when we saw that the talks that were called by the Minister for Labour flopped, because there are some parties which never demonstrated that goodwill to be there and to demonstrate their willingness to be part of the solution, because everyone is posturing and trying to show that they are not part of the problem, whereas this is something that should be addressed as a collective issue that affects Kenyans. So in terms of where does the buck stops, it is a matter that should be addressed through interagency and intergovernmental cooperation to make sure that it works. But critically, I think we have also, this nurses strike has revealed, and coming from the experience of the doctor strike, we went 100 days without critical healthcare in our health services, and now we are in day 5 of the nurses strike. And what we are seeing, as what my friend Dennis was saying, apart from the lack of political goodwill, we have leaders who are not responsive to the needs of the people and even the needs of the workers. Because you look at the nurses, they went on strike in December. This draft CBA was entered into in December, and you fail to understand why it has taken almost 6 months down the line for it to become now a matter that is now being dispensed with at the moment, yet they had 6 months to deal with this. So it is lack of responsive leadership on one side, and also poor or weak intergovernmental and interagency cooperation.
So do you read malice, also Dennis, do you read malice in this between the SRC and the COG? Is there some underlying issues that we might not be aware about, as well as the political goodwill that you've already mentioned?
Certainly, Willis, I see a lot of, not even just malice, lack of leadership and ownership on this matter is what is actually reflecting quite much. Because this has been an underlying issue for a long time. It's not just something that popped up. But what I'd look at is how can we then protect the professionalism of professional careers, and by the end of the day these are Kenyans who are dying and suffering. Who is going to be held responsible for the death of Kenyans, Willis, by the end of the day? We can see the disregard of suffering of the citizenry in this country, and yet nobody is actually batting an eyelid. And for me, that then also indicates moral apathy of these leaders who really don't care whether people die or not. They don't care whether the nurses feed or not. And that is for me a grave and a great underlying issue that has to be quickly relooked at, even by the electorate. And for me, really, the person that we honestly and seriously need to send home is the whole bunch of the Council of Governors, because this, for real, looks like some sort of utmost goodwill to ensure that the lives of Kenyans perish. Because how can you not treat the health sector and this grave issue with no urgency at all? You keep on pointing fingers there about. We really need to relook at the issue of critical services in this country, and I think we need to treat health with the same regard that we treat security, and we need to look at our doctors and nurses with the same regard that we look at our military, because surely we cannot have health services collapse in this country. Therefore, if we cannot leave the military to be managed by politicians, then in the same breath we shouldn't give them our doctors and nurses, because ultimately the two of them lead to wanton destruction and death, and which is technically what we are seeing. The administrative issues that are not being addressed is essentially not anything to look at. I think we need to carefully, in the next 5 years, look at how and where do we peg essential services in Kenya.
Well, DG, 6 months since December, before we have this conversation again, where we have to go on strike before some of these matters are brought to the fore. I guess the question that I'll pose, the same question that Dennis is raising, and probably most of the country is raising: does the COG, do the political leaders care about the plight of the nurses and the electorate in this case?
Well, it's important in how Dennis is looking at it, but it's also important to separate institutions and individuals. The Council of Governors sits in as the institution that handles health as a devolved function under the Constitution. And when the draft CBA was put together and passed on to SLC, because the salaries will be determined by SLC. SLC are the ones who said these salaries are too much. So how do you handle a Council of Governors like it is irresponsible? That's not the case. The Council of Governors was willing to pay the nurses, and that is why they had appended a signature on the draft CBA. Why SLC found it like it's too much to pay has nothing to do with the willingness of the Council of Governors to get the nurses properly remunerated. And the back ends at SLC. They're the ones who determines what level of remuneration is. It's not that the Council of Governors determines. If they were to determine, they would have paid, because they're saying within their recurrent expenditure they had factored in the new wage bill for the nurses. So it's the onus is on the SLC to then guide and say, if it is not what was initially agreed in the draft CBA, what should be the pay level for the nurses? And the Council of Governors will just effect as they pay other workers under the counties. So it's not a question of a sitting governor or an aspiring governor who would make the changes. It is the guiding parameters and principles which are handled by SLC. And I would clearly urge SLC to get us out of this quagmire we are in, so that the nurses can be paid and get back to work.
Charles, the buck stops with SRC?
I insist still the buck does not stop with the SRC. The SRC is just an agency that is created to deal with one issue. But when you see, I want to sympathize with the position of the Deputy Governor, because as the leader at the county level, I think sometimes they are given a very huge wage burden from other quarters, which they have to implement at their levels. If you look at many counties, almost around 30 or 40% of their budgets go to the healthcare sector, and mainly in terms of remunerations. So if there is an increase in these monies, then again the counties have a challenge in terms of now meeting these needs. But counties under the leadership of the COG should now up their game in terms of doing diplomacy even with the SRC and saying, when you are signing a CBA, have you done your due diligence with the SRC to see that this wage bill that you are now incurring to the national coffers, is it affordable first of all, and is it sustainable, and is it in tandem with the prevailing rates that the civil service and the public service is being paid across other cadres? Because in one of the arguments of the SRC was that whereas one of the monies that the COG had appended their signatures was about 3 times more than what is being paid to other cadres, because they were saying 15,700 for nurses, for nursing allowance, I think, and then the SRC was saying we are capping it at 5,000 because that is the rate that is there, and it is based on the that structure. They were doing a review of the pay structures across the civil service. So in as much as the COG wants to say that the SRC is the one which is at fault, they should do their due diligence. You don't just come in and put your signature on a document knowing that it gives a huge wage bill and a burden to the national government, through which the SRC has now been given the responsibility to make sure that these monies are not only affordable but also sustainable.
Right, and also, Dennis, in general about healthcare, do you feel that the governors or the counties rather have handled the devolution of health the way it should be?
I think, Willis, you've asked a very, very critical question, and that's a question that needs to be brought to the floor of the House in the next Parliament. Because, first of all, you cannot look at health as any other sector, because health falls under critical services as security and every other thing. We honestly need to relook at the sector and see how to rework it around, see what kind of policies to review, see how we treat the sector all the way from when we recruit and train the doctors. It's unfortunate to know that Kenyans don't pay for police or military school, but they pay for medical and nursing schools, yet they're dispensing much more critical services. We need to relook at how we retrain. We need to encourage Kenyans to sign up to be medics. And the way I look at it, Willis, is critical. If you look at the budget that Nairobi was given for the fiscal year 2016-2017, it was 15 billion, and if you look at what they said was basically their wage bill, which they upped by $1 billion, went to about 3 billion shillings. So it doesn't look like the issue is the lack of resources. It looks, and the governors, by the way, traditionally they've never shied off from asking for money very, very strongly, and even threatened to cripple some services. I think for me is that there's political apathy on matters of properly remunerating our workers. There's apathy in terms of dispensing correct service to the public, and we have completely missed the point on how we should manage and drive the health sector in this country. Given the fact, by the way, it's not a free service, almost like security. It's a service that Kenyans pay dearly to get medical service and medical cover in this country. We have to go back all the way to the table and see how do we resolve this perennial issue of strikes and even bad service dispensation. You'll be shocked, Willis, is that some areas have outright strike, but the entire country is on literal go slow. I was in Limbo the other day, and the nurses are not working. People are withdrawing their sick relatives from hospitals, because essentially the entire country has almost been crippled. but yet the governors are campaigning every day and giving additional promises and even perhaps using our money to campaign, but there's no political will to try and push and see that nurses are properly remunerated and the health service is properly dispensed. So this is something that we completely need to overhaul to make sure that we bring the dignity back to this sector. Because Willis, when I was growing up, I never ever imagined that I will ever see a doctor in the streets blowing whistles and sleeping on tarmac because of a politician who sits in office that we put there for them to make sure that these services are properly dispensed. So for me, it's an issue that is in very, very bad taste.
All right, but Deputy Governor, of course, I want to wrap up this issue, but I give you
I think we are heading this country in the wrong direction if any solution that is looked after must not come through strikes. We have seen in the last 2-3 years, literally demands for everything are culminated in strikes. Change IBC, strikes on the road. Teachers say, strikes on the road. Doctors, strikes on the road. Nurses, strikes on the road. We do not know who next will go on strike. And I think for all of us, we need to see, must we demand issues through strikes? And my guide on this would be, it is important people get onto negotiation tables, regardless of which issue is confronting who at what point in time. But if we all say we go on strikes, what are we telling the world? That Kenya results must only come after a strike. I don't think that's the right thing to do, but people should negotiate in all issues that they want resolved.
And do you think, just finally on the question about the way the health has been handled, I mean, there's definitely been challenges, but do you think that it's time to relook at the devolving of health to the counties?
It's very important for people to understand that it's in the 4th year of devolved functions. And it was not expected that things should settle all at once. And I think on, if I was to rate how devolved functions have settled down, I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, it's at about 6 to 7. Health has had its own challenges because you've seen the nurses strike, the doctors strike, and that leaves people saying health maybe should not have been devolved. My take on this would say, was it the right time to devolve health, or it should have been gradual? And I think things will settle gradually and everybody will be happy with how devolved functions are operating.
All right, of course, I want to switch gears now to another conversation. A very important day today in terms of the election. It's 59 days to the election, as you know, and the IBC, that is Electoral Boundaries Commission, will undertake the functional testing and verification of electoral technology. That's happening today. And in attendance, of course, we have representatives from all political parties. We'll have the civil society organizations, the faith-based organizations as well, youth groups, government and quasi-government bodies. And as the voter registration exercise, verification exercise comes to an end today, IBC is indeed confident that the use of technology to authenticate voters using biometrics is a test to the Commission being ready for the general election. Now, is that the case? We want to tackle that right about now. And I'll begin with Charles and Dennis on this, and I'll bring with you, Charles. Of course, there are 15,000 candidates, 35 political parties. They are set to battle it out in the August elections. We have 59 days. IBC says it is ready. It is set to gazette the names either today or tomorrow. Do you think they are ready? Is this a testament that they are ready?
Well, I think we want to give credit to the IBC for the far that they have been able to achieve, putting in mind that the commissioners are new and they have really not been tested in terms of delivering an election. And we clearly do not have a baseline in terms of saying the IBC is not able to deliver a credible election. But in terms of preparations and meeting the requirements as set out in the elections operations plan and the critical timelines that they're supposed to meet, I think I'd want to say that the IBC has really put its best foot forward and they are doing their best. However, what I want to say is that issues of hardware aside technology, the issue that really Kenyans we want to look at is the software of the elections. That we are here, the IBC has said we are going to deliver the kits, they've been able to do that, and even carry out concurrent voter verification while they are also doing the audits. So in terms of meeting the demands as per the requirements in their timelines, they've been able to do that. The challenge rests in the perceptions that Kenyans have in the IBC, and also the benefit of confidence that we are injecting into the institution. So first of all, I want to look at the key electoral players and look at them in terms of, are they willing to commit to support the IBC in terms of working with them and not limiting their activities in terms of continuous litigation, trying to put them to court all the time, and basically pressurizing them to deliver on something that they have not really been tested on. So the IBC on one side is really trying so much to deliver, and it falls on the political class especially, and all the other stakeholders to make sure that they are supported. And it is important, and also something worth noting, that the IBC has used the multi-stakeholder approach in terms of doing the testing of the equipment that they are doing today, and it is a good move going forward. So I think in terms of involving everyone and putting all the information out in the public, I was even reading today in the morning that the IBC is planning a conference just to try and tell Kenyans how far they are in terms of preparation, where are we in terms of the technology demands and all that. Critically and finally, I think one of the things that we need to really look at is the support infrastructure. If the IBC procures biometric voter identification kits, do we have assurance that there is power connection in every polling station in our country? Do we have good telecommunication infrastructure across the country so that they are able to carry out their work? Because it will be in vain if the IBC procures all this equipment, they deploy them to the respective polling stations, and then they go probably to a polling station that maybe does not have power connection, or there is no telecommunication connectivity in that area. Therefore, they may not be able to transmit the results. Voting may not even go on as desired. So the issue that is critical is on the support infrastructure, and the government has really tried in terms of the last mile connectivity to prioritize schools, which are mainly the primary polling stations, especially in the rural areas, to make sure that they are connected to electricity. So we need to look at the issue of the support infrastructure, and us, the Kenyans, starting from our leaders and going down, giving them confidence and making their work easier by ceasing this habit of trying to always litigate against them, pressurizing, threatening the IBC, and doing all those things.
Right, of course, the issue about transmission of results, another whole topic altogether. We'll be talking towards the tail end of this discussion. But I want to get the same views from Dennis about, do you think the IBC is ready for this? Because of course there are some people who still say that they're not entirely ready.
Willis, again, that's a very critical question to ask, and I think whatever doubt that we have as Kenyans has to be answered before we conduct the general election. Certainly we cannot leave anything unanswered, and we have to make sure that we have ensured that IBC has provided for us answers to all checks and balances. And of course we can literally say we have a new institution as IBC, because we have new officers in place, and IBC has the opportunity to clear its name with this election. But of course it's not entirely up to IBC to deliver the election. The candidates have a responsibility. Intergovernmental agencies that are working with IBC have a responsibility on matters security, matters electricity, matters networking. And so literally we're seeing the intergovernmental agency approach. It has to be foolproof in terms of ensuring that the quality of election that is delivered then is fully on the basis of integrity and cannot be questioned. But even if there's any matters that arise in terms of questions of whether somebody won or not, is that various bodies like the judiciary can come and properly adjudicate on some of these matters. But Willis, the amazing thing for me that I see is that IBC is honestly trying, and I'll give them 70% of 100 to ensure that they truly deliver an election as per what the Constitution specifies. Now, for me, my worry is that for the first time, we have systems that have never been tested in the country, and systems are subject to failure. and essentially that can be the excuse that any organization can make. So these systems must be tried, tested. We have to make sure that we do dry runs completely, and we have to make sure that we have proper backup system to ensure that in some areas, whether we have a security problem or whether we have a power problem or whether we have a network problem, what is the turnaround to resolve some of these incidentals or incidents or accidents or downtime that can be addressed quickly? And will IBC keep Kenyans appraised on some of these matters? The last election, surely, election announcements delayed for a while, and it put the country in such a position that everybody, emotions were almost rising up. So it's proper that IBC looks at all manner of things and works out all scenarios in terms of failure and make sure that the same is properly mitigated. And we have to run a fragility assessment of what happens if there's a failure of this and there's a failure of this, and what is the mitigation process to make sure that we don't have a lot of downtime. But critical is that we don't have challenges of an election being challenged as falsified thereabout. But we have to be very quick as Kenyans to unqualify politicians who are trying to disqualify IBC on administrative issues that they can ask the government to offer. We have to be very careful that politicians do not disqualify IBC before the general election. We must have ultimate trust on an institution that we have to own it as Kenyans, and basically that being the proper adjudicator of delivering for us our proper elections. And really, the election is run by Kenyans. The returning officers, the presiding officers, all those are Kenyans. We want them to drive an election. Of course, there's the aspect, Willis, of personal and moral integrity of an individual, even as opposed to the institution of IBC. And we pray that the people that IBC puts on our trust to deliver critical answers and to run the election are purely people who have a proper moral integrity that cannot be questioned, that they cannot be bought, they cannot lie based on their tri-party inclinations, and these are people who are not Mrengo this and Mrengo he. These are people who are Mrengo Kenya, so that we can build Kenya together.
Okay, of course, credit to IBC, though. Of course, we have the Elections Act. Section 44 of 2011 does say that the commission is to, quote, test, verify, deploy such technology at least 60 days before the general election. We are now 59 days, so they seem to be well on their way in that regard. Of course, this will be what happened the last general election, where they are being tested, I think about a week or so towards the election. So, bringing the deputy governor, is this a step in the right direction? And in your view, is the IBC quite set for this particular exercise on August 8th?
It's very important to give credit where it's due. And IBC has continuously updated Kenyans on what they are doing almost on a day-to-day basis. And this is, I would put it across, this is a way of confidence building among the Kenyans. We started from the premise that IEBC is not credible. And this will come from anybody who might fear a lose in the general elections. And as we have seen in the past, we've always had a blame on IEBC. And I think we are preparing ourselves to that. But however, what the Wafula Chebukati-led commission has done, to me, is excellent. They update us on when the kids come, they update us on what they are doing, they have done the voter verification, which is an exercise that has been conducted very well. I've personally had gone to several stations to see how they are doing it, by virtue that I have an interest in the exercise. And they're doing a commendable job that we must credit them for that. What us Kenyans must believe in is that once an institution has the mandate to perform a certain duty, we should build confidence in it, anticipate good results, and I hope this time round IBC will do it. Challenges might be there, like it's been mentioned. There could be challenges of electricity. I hope they have proper backup systems that in case there is power failure, what will be the next course of action. And also they must ensure that they've not been tested. Their first test is the 2017 general election, and they must prove to Kenya their capability in this, which I am sure it will come through to tell us that they've done a credible job.
Of course, there are questions that are arising, and which Dennis alluded to as well, in terms of, we're looking at the reliability of the technology, and the tamper-proof, as well as, like you said, Dennis, was the end there, that at the end of the day, the election still will be run by Kenyans. So we're also looking at the skill set of the people who are going to be running these particular machines as well, and the recent challenges that were there in terms of the ICT sector in the IBC. Charles, do you think that this is an area of concern, and are these concerns being addressed adequately?
Well, I think this is an issue that it is a concern. Anything that will affect the overall outcome of the general election is of real concern. And when it comes to the capacity, of the technical capacity of the IBC in terms of the staffing to be able to deliver a good poll, then we should be concerned as Kenyans. So from where I sit, I think the IBC has really tried, as Honorable Governor, Deputy Governor has told us here, in terms of continuously appraising Kenyans in terms of what is going on, and we've even whereas sometimes they may not be telling us what is going on, we read in the media that so and so has been fired for probably just incompetence during a period where delivering an election credibly is of utmost importance. So I think the IBC has demonstrated its strong willingness that it is uncompromising when it comes to having the correct skill set to deliver this election. So we give it up to them, and we hope that you see, the interesting bit is that we usually see the commissioners as the face of the IBC. We rarely see the technical team, the secretariats going down of the IBC. So we may not know who is where at what time. But from what we've seen in the media and in the reports in the public domain, a few weeks ago, the head of the ICT was sacked. Even a few days ago, then again, even the one in charge of procurement. So we are seeing an uncompromising stance by the IBC to ensure that nobody will be allowed to do anything that will compromise the integrity of the elections. So to that, I give the IBC a very good score. But overall, I want to add that apart from really what we are looking at in terms of the preparedness and the ability of the IBC to deliver a credible poll, historically, most of the challenges we have witnessed we've been able to weather as a country. The challenge is in terms of the key players in the elections, which are the aspirants, especially at the presidential level, coming out and giving that confidence amongst the people to the IBC. And importantly, what is lacking in our political discourse and even during these campaigns right now is a declaration by these aspirants from wherever they are that they are going to accept the outcome of the results, and that they're asking Kenyans to support the IBC to do its work. So we only see, interestingly, that when the IBC was asking Kenyans to go out and register, the political class went out all out. It almost became like it is political parties who are registering people, but it was the IBC. That was on a matter that was touching them directly. And even now that they are doing verification, it is not really a critical matter, but you see that is something that touches on the numbers. You can see a politician coming out and saying, in my constituency there are 10,000 bad voters who have bad details which have to be corrected. But you want to see this seriousness also being demonstrated in terms of building the citizens' confidence in the IBC, and importantly telling Kenyans that we please support the IBC in all its work, and secondly, accept the outcome of the results as they shall be, and if you contest them, then contest through the legal avenues that exist.
Right, of course, there's also another matter that it is in the courts, but it's still a point of public concern in terms of what is happening between the opposition and the IBC. The opposition wanting the results to be announced, the presidential results that are announced at constituency level to be final. IBC wants them, of course, to go to the National Talent Center. There's when the announcement could be made, bearing in mind, of course, it is still a matter in the court. Just in terms of the opinions is what we will discuss without trying to influence in any way. So I'll bring in Dennis just to briefly bring in, what is your opinion on this particular back and forth that's happening in the court process in between, in terms of the position of IBC versus the position of the opposition?
Willis, that's a critical question that has to be answered fast. And I think the opportunity of the court is essentially to interpret the Constitution and not to redefine what the Constitution says. The Constitution is very clear on the roles and responsibilities of the constituency returning officer. And amongst them is actually the announcements of presidential results And I think for me, really, the opposition here is right in terms of demanding essentially what the Constitution demands and thereabout. And I think the judiciary has the opportunity not to look as though it is mrengo hu, mrengo ule. It has to be there basically to to let Kenyans know what the Constitution says on this matter. Now, Willis, why is that important for the court to determine this the right way? Because this very thing sets up this election to be challenged as not being credible, and that is a very, very dangerous road that this country would walk to. If that issue is not determined firmly as fast as possible, so that we can have adequate time to walk through that issue before the general election thereabout. And I think so what happens is that for me, I'd say is that let the court determine this based on what the Constitution says, and what the Constitution says are the responsibilities of the constituency returning officer. Right. By the way, if then there's any if there's anybody who will challenge the presidential results, for me that means that if we go that way, then the presidential elections will not be challenged as blanketly as an entire country. Is that we have the opportunity to look at which constituency are you challenging the results at, and then we are able to say there's an issue with 10 constituencies, 50 constituencies, 10 constituencies, and we're able to save money, taxpayers' money. Then we're able to see really this conversation about strongholds, really what the actual strongholds. And I as a Kenyan, and even as I'm sitting home, I'm able to track who has won in which constituency, and that also gives me confidence that look, I know how the elections are going, and also it gives adequate time even for security forces and everybody else to try and prepare for any kind of eventuality. Right. But ultimately we will save the taxpayer money if the results are challenged from a constituency aspect. But this is something that is constitutional. The court already ruled on that matter. Of course, IBC is challenging, and I think we need to let these things settle as fast as possible, because it sets us up to this election being challenged, and being challenged on constitutional grounds, which is a very dangerous road to take as a country.
All right, we're going to be winding up on this particular issue because we're coming up at the top of the hour. I want to take final comments on this particular matter. We'll begin from the Deputy Governor Muranga.
The results will come to the final tallying center from the 290 constituencies, where they will give a tally of which presidential candidate got what number of votes. And this must be tallied now at the National Tallying Center, which should be the ideal thing to do, because you will have the results of the constituency brought together to the National Tallying Center and forming a base of the final result of who among the presidential candidate gets what votes. Whether the issue of disputing that is what is paramount and what we may need to look at from the onset is something completely different. But I think the results will come to the tally center from the constituencies as the number voted there.
All right, well, I will also take final comments as well from Charles Kipler on this matter of the position of the opposition and the position of IBC on the tally, the relay of the results.
Okay, thanks, Willis. And I think it's really my position is that this is unfortunate that we are going to an election, and we are faced with a situation where the agency that is has the responsibility of carrying out the election is now in court as an interested party, and one of the political parties at the presidential level is a party also to this issue. So the question that begs is, in the event that the court rules in a manner that shall not be agreeable to one of the sides, what next for us as a country? So I agree with my friend Dennis that we need to dispense with this matter as fast as possible, but importantly, this matter should not be looked only as a grey, white or black issue. We should also have a grey area in terms of, we are saying fine that the constituency, if at all we want the constituency returning officers to be the ones who are doing the declaration of the results as final, then are we saying in the event that there is an issue that has been detected that requires verification because there is anomalies in these results, then have we removed all the powers from the National Returning Officer in terms of correcting these anomalies, or are we only setting the ground for litigation and dispute of these results based on an issue that we could have addressed by not essentially going the path of allocating all powers either to the constituency returning officers or going the other way of doing it totally at the national level. So for example, I want to give the example of Baringo County Chiati constituency. In the previous election, there was the claim that Chiati constituency returned more votes for the presidential candidate more than the registered voters. So in the event that we go into the same election with the same results and the same scenario arises, so are we tied the hands of the national returning officer to say a certain constituency has probably 50,000 votes, and now the presidential candidate has been given 70,000. And since you said the constituency returning officer declares results as final, then we are not going to alter these results. Does the national returning officer just announce these results well aware that there is an anomaly in them? So the issue is, the error we have taken as a country is we are looking this as a black and white issue. We are not giving the room for compromise in terms of the grey area of allocating powers to the returning officer to declare, but also giving an opportunity for the national returning officer to verify in the event that there is anomalies that have been identified in that process.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen, as well. At this point, at this point, our conversation will end there. But of course, it's a matter, clearly a matter that's still in the courts, and the courts are going to deliberate and as both sides ventilate on the matter. So for this particular hour, my hour ends right here. This is an extra. I'm going to be tossing it over back to one Jeff Koinange, who has just come down from
downstairs.
Jeff Angelas on Hot 96. How you doing, Jeff?
Hey, well, how you doing, man? They're waiting for you upstairs, by the way. Malita went.
So we're switching roles. We're just one big happy family here.
Exactly, exactly. So listen, yeah, we're going to be talking about the electoral race. So far, is the IEBC ready for this election? A lot of people are asking that question. The communication strategy for the IEBC, has it been consistent? You know, Willis, today is the last day of verification of your votes, so make sure you verify your votes so that on August 8th, it becomes a smooth process. Going to be having experts right here, Barack Muluka, expert Mark Bichachi, and Brian Weke, all in the studio to discuss all of this. And then at the 11 o'clock hour, youth and politics. It's going to be a great 2 hours ahead, Willis. We're looking forward to it.
All right, thank you very much, Jeff. Of course, speaking of elections, also in London, Theresa May has refused to quit as Prime Minister despite the disaster, what people are calling a disastrous election night at the UK. They voted for what is called a hung parliament. So what is happening right now, it is confirmed there is a no Tory majority. Labour has 23 seats from the Conservatives. The big question now is, will Theresa May resign? I'm going to leave you with those pictures. My name is Will Saburu. It's been a pleasure. Remember, successful people look like you and the great Manchester United. You'll be with Jeff. Don't go too far. The hashtag is the next one.